marine litter is a massive problem, as we know. We've been brought attention to this recently, and we're tackling it in a variety of different ways. And interestingly, 60 to 80% of marine litter is plastics, and the vast majority of this comes in from rivers. So in 2010 alone, 275 million metric tons, that's a large amount, was generated plastics. About 9 million tons of that is actually coming through from rivers. And this is the primary way that plastics enter the oceans. The next one, which is only 1.5 million, I say only 1.5 million, that's still a large amount, that comes from just general dumping. So that's 7.5 million less than directly from rivers. One of the largest pollutants in the plastic world is from something called microfibres. So every time you wash a synthetic piece of clothing, about 1,900 pieces of fibre, which are made from plastics, enter the washing machine and then go down the drain. And this actually equates to about 700 million metric tons of fibres which are entering just the freshwater system through our wastewater. And then this again goes into rivers and then eventually enters the sea. Lots of plastics, we have a few different types here. So in my plastic bucket, I actually have a selection of different types of plastics which I got from the River Derwent. And interestingly, this was from the recent floods we've had, so it's been relatively easy to actually find a lot of these macroplastics, we call. So, not surprisingly, many of the plastics will actually be drinking bottles. So these are usually single-use drinking bottles. This is a Pepsi, well-known brands are available, and you can see it's been floating around in the Derwent for a lengthy period of time. We have also a lot of other things, so coffee cups are quite a well-known pollutant. This one's been again around for quite a period of time. And we also have things like forks, which you might have used for your lunch. And then quite often we get things like tomato sachets and stuff like that. And because of the plastics, it's something which is really hard, so it's really useful to contain lots of different products, but it means it doesn't break down for a very long period of time. It's thought to be over 100 years it takes for a plastic bottle to actually break down, and it's probably a lot longer than that. Then you also get some which are not single use. So in this instance we have a pair of glasses, again all made of plastics, and we have a very broken canoe paddle. So these are less of a problem, but still in the rivers, but they're still there, so it's something which we need to tackle. One thing we do get as well, so these are called macroplastics. Another part of plastics is microplastics. So as you can see with certain parts of this, the Costa Cop, for example, is little fragments. But this piece was just, I don't really know what this piece is, but you can see that it's already started to fragment. So you can imagine it would be a lot larger in its original form. And you can see with a little bit of effort we can start to tear it apart, and it produces smaller and smaller pieces. And all amount of plastics which have been produced right from the onset. So that's thought to be about 275 million tons, for example, in just 1 year, metric tons. That will never disappear. You can only burn plastics, recycle, but only to a finite amount, or they end up in places like landfills and rivers. And so they break down, and they break down, and they break down, and they produce what's known as microplastics. So here I have some examples of microplastics. It's quite difficult to actually show you what microplastics are due to their nature, but here we have some made which are actually of pink material, and this is similar to what I was talking about earlier about the fibres which come from your clothes. These are just micro beads, so individually they're very, very small circular beads. These have been dyed or coloured in this sort of pink plastic so you can see them, but they can come in any shape, form, colour as you can imagine. And the issue with this is that it's very difficult to actually see these. The macroplastics you can pick up, you can deal with. These ones are where you have to think of some ingenious inventions to actually remove these from the water column. So right in front of us here we have freshwater mussels. So these are native to the UK. Not many people know that we actually have about 5 species of freshwater mussel in our rivers and our canal networks. So these were actually taken directly from the university grounds in Markeaton Street, and they're found in Derby rivers. And what we're doing here is a little experimentation to actually see if these mussels can actually filter the plastics. This is interesting because we can start to study what's happening on a physiological nature for these mussels. Does it affect them? Does it harm them? And then also we can start to see if maybe these mussels could actually be utilised as a form of bioremediation. And that means that they can actually use something which is natural to remove this pollutant. And if we can use invasive mussels, which we're also trying to tackle, so these are zebra mussels, quagga mussels, things like that, and if we can use those to be effective at removing plastics, then maybe we can tackle two problems in one. So a lot of people always ask, what can we actually do about this problem? Obviously, one of the things we can do is just litter pick. This is a physical action. We can go around the rivers, the canals, and remove the macroplastics. What we can't do is remove the microplastics. So this is where more innovative technology needs to come into play to actually tackle this. But there's also dealing with the issue head on. What we can really do is reduce, reuse, and recycle plastics in the first instance. So they're the 3 R's which you need to actually focus on. Obviously, if we can do that, and that's tackling a consumer issue, so not going to grab another plastic bottle with your fizzy pop or your water in there off the shelf, but using a reusable cup and using these to refill your coffees or your Coke or your juices or your just general water, will make a large difference. It's a small action, but cumulatively it actually makes a big difference.